And our lead story this afternoon, well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Kuwait for a historic two-day visit. Of course, a big focus is the review of bilateral ties as far as India and Kuwait are concerned. Of course, he met both the Amir as well as the Crown Prince. Now, this assumes significance in the backdrop of India's outreach to the Gulf, something that we have seen in the past 2 years particularly. Whether it's India's bonhomie, the Prime Minister's camaraderie with the Crown Prince or the Amir, and of course the Diaspora outreach as well. As you can see in those pictures, the rousing welcome that the Prime Minister received in Kuwait. This diaspora diplomacy has certainly become one of the most important and recurring features of the Prime Minister's visits abroad, something that we've seen from the US to Europe to, of course, the Middle East as well. But what's on agenda? Well, the bilateral ties will be reviewed. The strengthening of bilateral ties, certainly the most important aspect of the Prime Minister's visit. Apart from that, energy, defense, manufacturing, and this of course also in the backdrop of what's happening in West Asia and the Middle East, in Syria, of course, also as far as the Israel-Gaza war is concerned. But let me quickly go across to my colleague Mohammed Ghazali, who tracks foreign affairs for us. Ghazali, what's the significance of the Prime Minister's visit? What all is on agenda?
See, besides all those MOUs which you mentioned, because Kuwait also happens to be the 6th largest supplier of our crude oil, besides that, India also has historical relations with Kuwait. Even before the oil was discovered there, till 1961, Indian currency was a legal tender there. You could purchase items in Indian currency. After that, we also had maritime business route with Kuwait. Kuwait used to deal with us in business terms as well. And after the 1960s, there have been many high-level visits from the Amirs of Kuwait to India. Indian Prime Ministers visiting there, but the last Indian Prime Minister who visited there was around 43 years ago when Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, and now Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made his first visit to Kuwait, because in the last 10 years he did visit the other members of the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. Kuwait being the president of that, it has been handed over the presidency recently. So India heading out to Kuwait, or Indian Prime Minister visiting there, assumes huge significance. One, because India's expats are in large number there, and India also sends a large number of workforce to Kuwait. And we saw that unfortunate incident happening earlier this year in the month of June or July, when many Indian workers were killed in a fire incident. So Indian Prime Minister today in his schedule is expected to address and visit the labor camp, one of the labor camps there, which shows that the Indian government attaches huge importance to the well-being of our workforce who are there in Arab world, or to say in the Gulf countries. Besides that, there will be agreements which will be signed between India and Kuwait. Besides the oil and energy sector, there will be about technology transfer. There is one other domain where India has been working very actively when it comes to diplomatic relations, because Indian educational universities are sort of opening their extended campuses, or say other campuses of other universities are being opened in other Gulf countries. We saw it happening in UAE. So one is education sector. The second is that India will also be talking about the energy sector. Clean energy is something which India is really working on and has signed multiple MOUs with many other countries. Also, as you rightly mentioned, that the situation in West Asia is something which will be certainly in the backdrop of this entire event, because recently we saw when the Foreign Affairs Minister, External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar was in Kuwait recently, he spoke to the Indian diaspora telling them that you should know India's stand when it comes to the Israel-Palestine issue or the wider conflict in West Asia, that India always stands with the two-state solution when it comes to Israel-Palestine conflict. But when it comes to conflict with Lebanon or with Hezbollah in Lebanon or with Syria, India always had provided aid and other support to these countries who are facing conflict for the last multiple decades.
Very much for joining us with that update. Revan D'Souza, managing editor of the Times Kuwait, is also joining us now. He met the Prime Minister, in fact, also Ajay Goyal, Secretary of the Indian Community Support Group. Thanks, gentlemen, very much for being with us. Mr. D'Souza, to you first. Of course, the optics of the Prime Minister's visit. You met the Prime Minister yourself. What is the sentiment there largely? Of course, this diaspora outreach is something that's a very important aspect of the Prime Minister's visit abroad. And given the number of expats there and the workforce that India sends to Kuwait, certainly the sentiment very upbeat about the Prime Minister's visit.
Yes, thank you. The Prime Minister was accorded a very, very warm welcome. The community is elated. He was given a grand reception on his arrival to the hotel. He was welcomed. Everybody was overjoyed to see him. We met him, saw him very briefly. There was a small presentation, cultural presentation, which he witnessed and shook hands. And the community has really been so happy. There's been ads, congratulatory supplements, there's been billboards. I think the tone is so positive right from the onset. And we expect many more great things to happen. There's a huge community meeting of more than 5,000 meeting in a coming few hours at one of the big stadiums. The Prime Minister is also visiting a labor camp where he'll interact with the labor force. So it's a very wide gambit of interaction today with the community, and they are just, I can just tell you, the atmosphere was absolutely electric at the hall.
Absolutely. Mr. Goel, weigh in on this. What really is the expectation of the Indian community as far as Kuwait is concerned, as far as the Gulf nations are concerned, given the fact that there's a large number of blue-collar workers who are Indian, who work in countries like Kuwait. In fact, Indians in Kuwait really top the private sector, also the domestic sector. So a huge Indian workforce there as far as Kuwait goes. What is the expectation of the Indian community, the Indian diaspora there?
I think his visit will boost the relationship. He will create a good environment for people to work here, though it is already an excellent environment, but his visit will strengthen it more and people will feel more comfortable to be in Kuwait. And with his visit, the relationship will improve. The other norms of visas and things will become more easier. That is what we expect. And also the trade relationship will increase. There will be a large trade which will be encouraged by Mr. Modi's visit.
Which is why Gulf nations become so important for India, and it certainly is, as many would say, a symbiotic relationship between India and the Gulf. And I want to agree with that, Mr. D'Souza. In the past 2 years particularly, since the G20, since the announcement of the India-Middle East-Europe corridor, trade relations have only deepened as far as India and the Gulf nations are concerned. How significant is that?
That's absolutely right. We've had trade relations for a very, very long time, and this is the only thing left in the agenda, a highest level visit from a Prime Minister to Kuwait, which has not happened for 43 years. Kuwait and India enjoy historical relations. We have strong trade ties, and this will only take it to the next level. The community is elated because we see this happening. A visit from our head of state can really make things happen, can change things. You know, Kuwait is also like a dean of diplomacy in the entire Arabian Gulf. They are having the third largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. They are having a very strong foreign policy, very similar to ours, balanced. And so we have so many commonalities. It's only a matter of our Prime Minister meeting their head of state, which is Kuwait. And I think many more good things expected to come out of this visit.
Also, Mr. D'Souza, you know, something that is of great importance geopolitically right now is, of course, you have two active wars, particularly the situation in West Asia. West Asia continues to be on edge, whether it's what's happening in Syria with the coming down of Assad's regime, to, of course, the Israel-Gaza war. How do you see India and perhaps the Gulf nations as well in pole position to, in a sense, initiate a peace process, to negotiate, to play the role of a mediator and negotiator in this entire conflict?
Absolutely correct. Kuwait has been a mediator during the Qatar-Saudi crisis. Kuwait has been a mediator on several occasions. And today, Kuwait is holding the presidency of the Gulf Cooperation Council. That being said, the Gulf Cooperation Council is a very powerful body now. They have trillions of dollars in trade and investment all over the world, and they are now getting stronger politically. So I think if our Prime Minister in India engages with Kuwait, they are really engaging with the entire Gulf politically. And that would be a good sign because both of us, India and Kuwait, are looking for peace, and a peace agreement is best for all.
That's an important point you're making, because in his past interactions with the Crown Prince as well, this is something that has been reiterated and emphasized, that there is a sense of shared values perhaps between India and Kuwait and the Gulf nations. Would you agree, Mr. Goel, that there is a sense that peace is the only way forward, something that the Crown Prince has also spoken about?
Fully agree with you and endorse this. it will definitely strengthen the relationship better. The people one-to-one relationship will increase, which is already deep-rooted for last so many years. It goes back to even 60, 70, 100 years when the people from Kuwait and India used to trade, visit each other. As well, a lot of Kuwaitis used to live even in Mumbai and India, and they used to trade. So now that relationship will get further strengthened by these visits.
Absolutely, and I think that people-to-people connect becomes extremely critical. Mr. D'Souza and Mr. Goel, thanks very much for being with us. A very important visit indeed there by the Prime Minister, a two-day visit to Kuwait. After over 40 decades, an Indian Prime Minister visiting the Gulf nation. A lot is on agenda, from, of course, bilateral ties to people connect, addressing the concerns of the Indian expats there as well. Thanks very much for being with us indeed.